And the small book, can you just like that? But the versus the poetry. But now it's got also English examples, it's explaining each verse. So the hearing is the focus towards you. Okay. That's how. So once it's out of focus, not about it. I mean, she wants everything in focus, not blur, not blur. But at least when we're able to show the screen and the board, so we need to move it back. No, we have to do when we do like this, it's not clear. So we have to share the observations. So we can see the screen and then we have a voice all over it. So who's not doing it? In this case. It's like a so I can use my iPad for Zoom, but I think we rather do the sharing. Well, that's the name of the book. Which is where you see the translation, right? The quest to the children. And someone said, one scholar said, as far as the Quran is concerned, we are all like children. They will always keep learning, never stop. So. That's a booklet of just a couple of dozen verses of poetry in Arabic. This PDF from one of our imams and teachers in New Jersey, slides with English translation and explanations of each verse of poetry. It's not going to give us all the verses, but just the explanations, examples. We just use it alongside, what I want to say. No. The name would come to me. I can't remember now. Just need to share the screen. And these hopefully showcase most of the lab. What is agent zero? So non-agent zero. Late. Luckily, about 300 years, 400 years ago. So which of these computers I can scroll? This one, yeah. That's just for Zoom. Okay.
Both as Zoom. This will show
For share.
and that will show.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. وبعد. First, I want to thank you for coming, young and old, brothers and sisters. This workshop's open to everyone. We're also live streaming, so the one question that came up is, what will we be covering, how long? I think the plan will be, inshallah, we'll do about 45, 50 minutes, have a break, come back to another 40, 45 minutes, have a break, and see how much we need at the end. The breaks will be about 5-10 minutes. And refresh and get some refreshments. Also, during this session, you won't have to recite. All right. Some of you may be a little anxious. They want to think of leaving earlier. When you think I might ask someone to read, that's not going to happen. Right? This is an introduction to the science of Tajweed. It may seem like a little long, but we're not going to cover much more than theoretical aspects of Tajweed and talk about what it means through these slides, inshallah, from one of our asatidha, one of our teachers that shared it with us. We, inshallah, we're planning to have at the masjid, that's going to be in person. So all these guys were online. The bad news is when we start Quran classes for adults in the masjid, it's in person. That's where we're going to, together, inshallah, as a group, practice some of the practical aspects of Tajweed together, and then individually, help you recite Quran correctly from memory or from now that are looking inside. That will be from next week onwards. We're working on, inshallah, getting a sister to come and teach the ladies, those who don't want to be in a co-ed class at the masjid. They have just for ladies or for sisters. We're just trying to line up at least one volunteer from those who can teach Quran, which is, not an easy thing to do. And if you look at this saying that opens this book, the hadith that may be known to you, the best among you are those who learn and teach the Quran, who learn the Quran and teach it. So one of our predecessors, Abu Abdurrahman, he says this hadith, taking this hadith and applying it, made me teach Quran from the time of Uthman alayhi salam, or radiallahu anhu, I should say, when he was the Khalifa, until the time of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. So he most likely lived in Iraq, Abu Abdurrahman. And, from the time of Khalifa Uthman until the time of the Umayyad Khilafah, and Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf was the governor of Iraq. Right? It's a long time, if considering. But think about it. He wanted to be the best of all people, because that's what the hadith says, the best among you. The best among you, of course, you can also be, aiming to be the best if you, start by learning about the Quran, learning the science of reciting the Quran. And inshallah, one day, maybe you've already started with your own children, you teach Quran. So, you will, inshallah, benefit from this. Is this okay? Worrying about the audio. Is the audio on? In the year? You gotta just check with Sister Farah if everything's in order. Maybe sending it. I'm going to start with just a few questions, like a survey. If I did it differently elsewhere, you might have, something to fill in, or, we can all do Kahoot or something like that. So, how many of you think that your level of Tajweed in both theory and practice is like in the 90% range? Maybe Mahmoud, she's being modest. Maybe no. I didn't say 100%, right? Because I don't think, many of us will be in that category. 90, maybe a few of us in the city somewhere, some of those who are teaching Quran, leading prayers, and have the track record. Some of you may think somewhere between 50 and 80. Those who said they're in the 90% above, then we can swap places. Because I don't think I'm even there. Allah knows best, right? So I'm just trying to give it my best shot, inshallah. If you aim to get into that category, it requires a lot of hard work. It requires knowledge in theory and then continuous practice. It requires that you recite to a teacher. So you say the Quran is taken antalaqi, right? Word to mouth, teacher to student, in person. Nowadays, maybe through Zoom could be similar, right? Sometimes I listen to students on Zoom, or I used to have it. I used to wonder, are they reading from memory, or are they cheating there at home? You know? Do they have like the Mus'haf open on the side? They say, I've memorized the whole surah, and Allah knows best. But nothing can replace that, being there in person. Let me ask another question. How many letters of the Arabic alphabet do we have? And it's not 26. 24 more. 28. Anybody else? 29. You said 29.
28 or 29, depending upon how they put it.
That's good. I think we should say 29. Because we should count the alif and the hamza separate. All right? But most times it's put together. And so what's the sound of the alif? It depends, right? If it's used as a long vowel, like after a letter that has a short fatha, which in the Quran is written as a fatha and then an alif, right? Nothing on the alif, will make us that sound of ah, like a ba and alif, ba. But that's not always the sound of alif. So you may also see a small hamza above or below. Sometimes you don't see it, but you see a short vowel, fatha, dhamma, kasra, and it's a, e, u. Or you may see a sukun, right, on top of a hamza, like in ya'kul. Ya'kul, that's a glottal stop. Right? No vowel when there's a sukun. And so, it's better to say that we have 29 letters. I've also seen when the alphabet's written down 30. So what am I seeing extra? Sometimes you see a lam alif. Of course, it's two letters put together, but because it has its own unique script, right? People might just put it there in the alphabet. Maybe also to make it a round figure, like 15 on one side and 1530. And you have like a division of, 30 letters this way. So lam alif's two letters put together. So, when we look at Tajweed, you will see, let's go by the slides and then I'll add stuff. So the Tajweed, there's rules and regulations. Tajweed is a unique science. It's used only for the Quran, right? You have to be reading Arabic or the Quran in Arabic. And that's the only place you can apply Tajweed. Have you guys heard it anywhere else? Probably not, right? But I've heard. Yeah, when people make dua sometimes, or like when you listen to say the witr salah, say from the Haramain, and maybe the imam's using rules of tajweed within a dua. That's okay. That's like common. Sometimes in the hadith, when they recite it a little differently than just reading it as normal Arabic. But I've also heard it, believe it or not, from a Christian radio station in Beirut, where they recited the Bible using some of the rules of Tajweed, or a style that's similar to Tajweed, and it sounded ridiculous. I'd rather listen to the Bible in Arabic, in ordinary Arabic reading. Right? But I think Allah knows best. It seemed like there was some kind of deception in there to make maybe some Muslims listen to it and think, wow, this is Quran, and then pay attention to the wording and the meanings and say, oh, Jesus is the Son of God and those kind of things. So we have to be smart too, right? We have to know when Quran is being recited. And one thing that helps us is Tajweed. Now, when we talk about Tajweed, we're not going to tell you, or you're not going to learn like styles of readings and what we call maqam, how to change your voice from a low tone to a high tone, and the melodious donations to add. That's a choice for you to do. Right? When we talk about the rules of Tajweed, it's fixed rules that we follow, that has come down to us from the time of the Prophet ﷺ initially, just through verbal communication. And at some point, the scholars got together, or individually they wrote down the rules to codify it for us and make it easy for us to apply it instead of, just relying totally on generation to generation it's being passed on. So, we have theory, right? We have theory and we have practice. In this booklet, they also talk a little bit about the different imams of recitation. So say, for example, Suleiman can read Warsh, right? And maybe some other Qira'ah, or in Morocco and other parts they did Warsh. We are more exposed to the recitation of Hafs and Asim, and that's the rules of Hafs and Asim that we're going to talk about. Right? We're not going to talk about the rules of Warsh because maybe the mudud are longer, right? They're making the med longer than maybe some of the ones we make in Hafs, etc. So we have to talk about only one of these imams, or one of the rawis of these imams, right? One of the two scholars of Asim, which is Hafs. Okay, so we can talk about the different tariqs that it came down. Tariq Tayyiba, Tariq al-Shatawiyya. There's some differences. That's a little advanced. Not everyone will appreciate that or need that. But some of us, as imams, or if you're reading Quran in prayers for people, or sometimes you wonder, how come some reciters of the Quran, when they come to Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, it's 4 harakat, or maybe 6 in Warsh, right? One of the ways in Warsh. 4 for some, 2 for others. It's not a mistake. It's just following certain tariqs of these recitations. It's correct. But if you want to shorten that muttasil, that's, ja is to lengthen or shorten, you need to know the rules. You can't just go ahead and do it. There's other rules that change when you do it from tariq tayyiba, as they say. But that's kind of advanced things, right? So what does tajweed mean? We can skip this also. This is basically reciting the Quran at different speeds, all right? This is mostly what these different terms refer back to. It's the meaning of tajweed. So maybe some of you know a little bit of Arabic, you know the word jayyid. You guys come across the word jayyid? Maybe ask Mahmoud in Arabic, how was a pizza in Arabic? His answer is jayyid. Right? Yeah, so jayyid is good. So from this word, we get tajweed, jawwada, to make something jayyid. So to improve something, right? Or as you see here, to beautify, to embellish, or to adorn. That's the linguistic meaning of tajweed. And it's really not really used even outside the science of Quran reading. So the technical term is to apply the rules that have come down to us when we recite the Quran, so that every letter or combination of letters, right, are given its due rights, applying the rules, putting them in, as they should be recited. And so, you got the technical meaning here, which is basically a translation of that old Arabic definition. But, in our times, we can use this contemporary definition. It's the method of reciting the Quran as it came down to us from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, applying the rules and principles that go with that recitation. So, say, for example, and especially if you're reading in public, right? You're reciting Salah, or you start a khutbah, you start an announcement, and you're using words from the Quran, and you're using, for example, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The Bismillah is the first ayah of the Quran from Surah Al-Fatiha. A'udhu billah is used when we recite the Quran. We don't want you, ideally, not to go up there and say things like A'udhu billah minash shaitan. It's not correct Arabic, right? A'udhu. So that's the kind of things, the letter Dal has rules applied for it to be pronounced correctly, where the tongue goes, right? So in Urdu, you might say auzu. But in Arabic, the tongue has to come between the teeth for this letter. Auzu. There's no excuse. I can't say I'm lazy. Sometimes they do it in the Arab world too, like haza. But when it comes to the Quran, they have to be a little more, use more, energy and strength and, awareness. هذا ذلك الكتاب ما ذلك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Not just Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rahim, Rahman, Rahman, Ar-Rahman. Right? So, and every part of the Quran that's recited has these rules that you have to apply. So let me ask another question. I'm going to do that every now and then, right? And you don't have to always answer. You can just shake your head for yes, if it's yes, no, nod or shake, or you can do the, I don't know, or just remain silent, That's my wife's favorite emoji. With the purple hijab, okay, what do I do now? She's no input from her, so, she's got to make a decision. Yeah, mine. No. Maybe she's online. You're right. Maybe it's actually a Moroccan brother. He's going back tomorrow morning to Morocco. I was just helping him move out, or clean out his apartment. He's my neighbor. So, yeah, question. Which two letters of the Arabic sound exactly the same? It's a trick question. Okay, let's rephrase it. Are there any two letters of the Arabic that sound the same? No. It's impossible. So, zu of A'udhu and zu, that's a different letter of the Arabic alphabet. So if you recite some other letter in place of the one you should be, you might be changing the meaning. You might be saying nonsense, saying a word that doesn't have anything technically. So people might have to think, did he or she make a mistake? And that's what they meant. That defeats the purpose of communication, right? A part of the purpose. So no two letters of the Arabic alphabet sound exactly the same. Right, so Hamza with a fatha is not the same as ayn with a fatha. All right, we need to make sure we know this rule that no two letters. That's why when you get an Arabic name and you're writing in Arabic, someone says, "My name is Sulaiman." Let's say we're speaking on the phone and I'm customer service. I'll never ask him, "How do you spell your name?" Like in Arabic. It's spelled the way it's pronounced. And the way it's written, there's only one way to pronounce it. Sulaiman, right? Because unless you look at the old Arabic where the alif was taken away and the dagger alif's putting on top, like in Ar-Rahman. So this one hasn't changed, but Sulaiman in the Quran doesn't have an alif at this point. But we can, in modern Arabic, we do editing. You see it more commonly outside the Quran with the alif. There are a few exceptions. Actually, it only works with alifs. Extra alif or alifs there, in other words, silent or it's taken away. No other letters, and this kind of thing happens. That's why in the Arab world, there's no spelling bees. Kids will be there the whole week, the whole month, the whole school year. You can't eliminate that. It's like you pronounce as the way the word's pronounced, the way it's spelled. There's no trying to trick you. Why is there a K in knife? There's no tricks in Arabic. Right? As they say, old English was knife. Oh, I'm best. I don't know. Sure. So, no two letters of Arabic sound the same. Also, it's important that we look at, when we're reading Quran, we look at the letters and we look at the voweling, the tashkil, right? All the symbols above and below, fatha, dhamma, kasra, kasra. Because that's, people who know Arabic might ignore that. And so, I listen to a radio station. It's actually from Palestine. Untitled Quran. A lot of times when I'm free, I just go online. I use on my phone. And I've heard, and they have programs for kids as well. Lots of kids will come on the radio or recording, I want to recite from Surah Al-Waqi'ah. When they get to the word tafakkahun, right? On the radio, recorded, not corrected, they read tafkahun because they only looked at the letters of that word, but not the vowel. See, changing the meaning, actually, in this case, the meaning's flipped, right? Instead of saying, you will be left, in a confused state, you'll be like enjoying it like fruit. Or, there's a part, and I've heard this from someone reciting in the Taraweeh, because, had to be corrected. When Musa alayhi salam was speaking to Allah, right? Allah sent him to Fir'aun, and, he said to Allah, وَتِلْكَ نِعْمَةٌ عَلَيَّ وَتِلْكَ نِعْمَةٌ تَمُدُّ عَلَيَّ أَنْ عَبَّدْتَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. أَنْ عَبَّدْ, this is a blessing he says to Allah for me, for us, that part of it is that you have made also Bani Israel into slaves. Abadta. What happens if you take the shadda away? Abadta, you worship. You can tell Allah you worship Bani Israel. That way you're blasphemous, right? Because you didn't mean it, the reciter, but this is the dangerous part. So, we also have to look carefully at the voweling. Most of us, or most of, especially non-Arabs, they need that tashkil, right? Desperately. That's why it's been put there, especially also, in the initial period when people were coming into Islam and people were also, adopting the Arabic language as their own. That was the need and, the urgency at that time, but it's even more needed now, I think. So, making mistakes can become very dangerous. And if we don't also apply the rules of Tajweed, we can end up, reciting the Quran in an undesired manner. So, there's major mistakes in Tajweed. I think there's a slide, and there's minor mistakes, but all mistakes are disliked. Some of them, are actually very, problematic. So, when the different recitations came to us, it came from a Qari, like Asim and Arawi, one of them, the narrator of that version of, the way the Quran is recited, like Asim or Hafs, and then one of the Turuqs, one of the ways it came down to us, like Al-Fil, is what you guys know. Most of us normally recite Hafs and Asim an Tariq Al-Fil. Some of us do it an Tariq Al-Tayyiba or Tariq Tayyiba. And there's 7 or 10 different qira'at of the Quran. So here's the Tajweed mistakes. Could be major or could be minor. And if it's major, it's forbidden. I mean, people do it, as a mistake. We can understand, inshallah, Allah will forgive them. It shouldn't be done intentionally. But minor mistakes, just like in the past, like with the Sahaba and those came in early generations, all types of mistakes, including Tajweed mistakes, were not tolerated. Right? Those who make mistakes, as the author says, the only thing where you make a mistake, you get rewarded. As the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever recites the Quran and is trying their best, but is trying their best, so they have an excuse, and they still make a mistake, they get a reward. A double reward is, for your trying and for making a mistake, I guess. A double reward is if you're reading it correctly. A double reward, single reward if you make a mistake. Also, when we learn about Tajweed, knowing the theory, what's the Arabic word for communal obligation? Fard Kifaya. So some members of a community have to know the theory. So that at least they can pass it on, they can teach others. And everyone, Fard Ain, is be able to apply. So there are lots of people that can read the Quran totally correct, all the rules of Tajweed, but they can't, define the rules. They can't explain why they're reading it this way. Why is it, why did you extend it to like 3 seconds instead of 1 med, for example, or a hunna? They can't explain it. That's good enough. They don't need to know it. And in fact, at some point in history, some of the scholars said, but it might be an innovation to write down the rules. If people are reading it correctly, there's no need for it. But, of course, they overcame that obstacle and debate. And they said, no, it's just one to write rules, to have theory, but more important for it to be put into practice. So everyone needs to know how to recite correctly, and not everyone needs to know all the rules. Because if you do know the rules, the theory, and you teach it and you explain it, inshallah, you get much more reward than just, reading it for yourself. So, and we're going to skip this part. The al-isti'adha is when you say at the beginning of your recitation, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And when you read the beginning of the surahs, and you read Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, because you might hear someone read A'udhu billahi sami'il alim minash shaitanir rajim. It's allowed. There's two ways to do the isti'adha. When you seek protection in Allah from shaitan, the rejected one. When you read Bismillah, of course, there's only one way. And then, reciting it together at the beginning of a surah, or if you're connecting two surahs, there's some explanation. We're going to skip all of that. But from my own notes, what should we do before we start reading the Quran? How do we prepare for reciting the Quran? So give me something to read. Let's say you're preparing, you say, I'm going to, read Quran. And so it's advisable if you're doing it as an act of worship, right, to prepare by doing your ablution, the wudu, just like, before Salah. If you're doing it only for like memorizing your lessons and stuff like that, scholars say it's okay if you don't have wudu. But if you're doing it as an act of worship, you want to be rewarded for your recitation, like like an act of ibadah, worship, do it with wudu. Right? That's correct. So that's one of the things you should do. What else? Yeah. Have a good intention, right? Niyyah, where you plan. It doesn't have to be actual words you say to yourself or, words in your mind. It's a thought. That's what niyyah is about. You're planning. It's a plan, right? Okay, after Salatul Maghrib, I'm going to remain in the masjid and pick up a mushaf and sit in the corner and I'm going to recite, all right? So that's called your intention. That's good. What else? So make sure you're dressed appropriately. It's always good to, most important thing is you have to have the part of the body that needs to be covered, like as if you're in a public place, that must be covered, right? Call it the awra, Mahmoud. So, you say if you're at home, Ahmed, in your shorty shorts, you're alone at home. You want to read Quran, put on the longer pants, right? Nice shirt. Many of our scholars, they would not, Imam Malik, for example, they would not even talk about a hadith without making wudu, putting on best clothes, perfume. Otherwise, no discussion. Man came to knock on his door. I have a question. Can you give me the answer? Ask the question. He say, wait. Went in his house, made wudu, put on his clothing, came back, put perfume, say, now I'll give you the answer. All right. So that's just for a hadith. Imagine what you would do for Quran. So, make sure it's better. We talked about this after Jummah, right? How now in the summer, people come for Salah and the shirts are too short and they go in, sisters see from the back, right? And the brothers go into ruku and sujood, becomes uncovered, right? Or the shorts are too short, really, right? Do something special extra because Salah is special. Dress in a more appropriate manner. You're standing in front of Allah. When you're reciting His book, you're talking to Allah, right? Or you're allowing Him to talk to you, I should say. When you do Salah, you're talking to Allah. And in Salah, you recite from the book. And, you also, when you read the Quran outside of Salah, you're allowing Allah to address you. So be an appropriate, attire. What else should you do? You're going to recite Quran. What's the best things to do? Try to face the Qibla, all right? Even at home. Try to find a comfortable place, whether it's on a chair, on the floor, face the Qibla, right? Sit in a manner that's also appropriate, plan, or choose the best times. It's going to work for you, where you'll be focused. Maybe you can dedicate extra time than if you chose another time. decide whether you want to recite aloud, which is always better, right? Because that'll help you recite correctly. It'll, make you aware of maybe some things that are not applied from Tajweed correctly. It'll also give you more confidence to read. If you're asked to read in public, this will help. So the louder they say, the better, especially if you memorize it. You're memorizing and you're just reading in your mind, it won't come as fast as if you were reading audibly. And the louder, the better. In the old days, when I used to scream in my car when I was alone, all the windows up, people used to see me in my jaws are going, but that time, people used to think this guy's gone crazy. But today it's like very normal because people are on their phones, right? On Bluetooth. So now it's easier to do that. Sometimes scream so loud, the people in the next car could hear me. So when you're reciting also, you want to start to become conscious if you're making mistakes. Because you might read and just continue, right? And just keep going, but not taking yourself to account. So you also want to pay attention, especially once you learn more of the rules of Tajweed and your recitation becomes better of the Quran. You also want to pay attention to maybe going back and correcting mistakes or finding out if it's been done correctly. All right. Okay, so that's basically this first part of this book. Now, before we take a little break, right, there are 29 letters of the alphabet. How many are consonants? How many are vowels? Lee, I think you did this with Dr. Palmer.
I can't remember right now off the top of my head. I think there's six back.
No, you're thinking about those 6 letters that maybe don't connect when you write them in script to the next letter. 3, right? So the letters of the alphabet, there are vowels, are the letters alif, waw, and ya, and they will be long vowels. They'll come after a letter. In the Mus'haf in the Quran, you'll see a fatha on the letter before alif, a dhamma on the waw, a kasra under the letter ya, which could be written this way or this way. Alif's always written this way, perhaps connected to the letter before, and the waw perhaps connected, but always written the same shape. The ya, depending on whether it's at the end of a word or not, right? This will be the shape. And when you see these letters and need to sound them out as a vowel, you hear the sound of a, u, e. And those are the only 3 vowel sounds that we have, which if they shorten, then you see a fatha on the letter, so the sound of for that consonant, sound of u for the sound of e, right? And in the Mus'haf, it could be at the beginning of a word, middle of a word, and end of a word. Like maybe you speak in Arabic and you don't put any vowels at the end of words. You make them all sukoon, yaktub instead of yaktubu. That can be outside the Quran, but in the Quran, unless you stop it, right? But you'll see it very commonly. Last letters on words, in words and not an end of ayah will have maybe short vowels, long vowels. Sometimes no vowels like min, right?
There's something very important. Sometimes when the vowels are double, you see in the book, they are written like same, I don't know how to say.
When you say double, you mean the shadda?
No, not
the shadda.
Like if the fatha, if the alif is double,
Yeah.
like an, or sometimes they can write it 2a, but the one is
you're
longer,
talking about the
the one is
tanween,
shorter.
okay.
Yes.
So
Like, yes.
double fatha sometimes
Double
written like
yes,
this,
they written like this.
and that's related to rules of tajweed.
Yes,
Right? So having kasra under the letter
yes.
could be written where the kasras are not one above the other,
So this thing,
to the side of each other. So here you might see a 99 or you might see a 69 for a double down.
and
Because it's
sound
related
is
to some
not the
rules. Tajweed, they're not exactly the same. So if we have question first, yes.
I don't think this is standard.
No, it's only
in certain.
it's in the like more the Medina Mus'haf. It's becoming now the norm. from that point on, it's relatively recent, right? If you have Masahif printed in Egypt, right, or Pakistan, you don't see them.
It's quite from ilm by itself, which is al-Rasul.
Yes, and
So that's something.
correct. Yes. Yeah. And there's choices, of whether to write it or not, and now it's becoming more normal to see this sometimes because of the rule of Tajweed that's been applied for that level that this vowel is on. So we said there are 28 or 29 letters of the alphabet, right? 3 of them are vowels, which means how many are consonants? I guess math is bad. These 2 letters can also be consonants. Because this one makes a w sound, and this makes a y sound. All right? The alif we're not going to count, whether it's e or u or long vowels. That's always a vowel. Alif is always a vowel, even if it has a hamza on it. All right? So we're left with what? 28. 26. 27. We take away from 29. The alif and the hamza, we're left with 27. If you're counting 28 and you take the alif away, because it's when you got 27. So it's 27 letters of the Arabic alphabet are consonants. Like they come of a B sound or a T sound or a S, right? Some of the Arabic letters, we said none of them sound the same. Some of them may look similar. The only difference might be the number of dots on the shell, above or below. Some of them may sound similar, but not exactly the same, like the S and the SAW, seen and saw, right? They may sound similar, but they're not exactly the same. So it's good to know which are the vowels and which are the consonants. Because some of the rules of Arabic are specific for vowels and the length of those vowels. All right, like the mads, the mudud. Also, just before we take a break, another question. Well, not a question, but out of these 29 letters of the Arabic alphabet, some of them, like here you see the noon and the meme, some of them we're going to have special, sections in detail about them. So some of them, these letters include the meme, the noon, the ra, the lam, right? And they have a special place in the rules of Tajweed. So it may be related to a ghunna sound that you elongate, that comes from your nose. The beautiful sound like inna ladina. It's longer than normal. It's not inna ladina. And if you block your nose, there should be no sound coming out. So you're not doing it correctly. It may be related to whether the letter is supposed to be heavy or light. Like you know what? Allah. Not Allah. Allah. Inna Allah. The lam is heavy. But in Bismillah, it's light. So some of the rules, right, apply for ghunna, some of them apply for what we call, isti'la and al-istifal or tafkhim and tarqiq, whether you make them heavy or, elevated or light or depressed. So those are, some special letters of the Arabic alphabet. Also, just before we break, at 7, before, we should also be aware that from my experience of teaching Quran and Tajweed, there are 3 aspects of Tajweed. We can categorize Tajweed into 3 categories, 3 sections, and say, this will help you understand the rules or at least, appreciate Tajweed. The first one is just the sound of the letters, what we call the makharij or sifat. The points of articulation and the quality or the attributes that each letter has. And for me, this is the most important part of Tajweed. It makes up 60% of someone's correct recitation, if not more. The second one is what we call the ghunna. Just going to spell it in you. That's that sound that comes from your nose, right? It's beautiful sound. That's the definition in Arabic, right? A beautiful sound that emanates through the nose. Right? So in other words, say when you read mimma, you're supposed to hold on to that meme that has the shadda, right? So this area. Because it's easy to forget to do that and you say mimma, like outside of the Quran. That's correct, outside the Quran. But in the Quran, you'll be doing ghunna. And the third aspect is what we call the lengthening, the elongation, or the mudud. How long certain vowels have to be. It's not always vowels, but most of the time vowels. So when you say Ya ayyuha, or idha jaa nasrullahi wal fath, wa ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Supposed to spend a number of seconds, right? More than just dallin, which would be okay if it wasn't Quran. So, that's the main three aspects of Tajweed. Sometimes, people also add a fourth one, and that is what we call stopping and continuing. So, waqf, al-wuquf, wal-wusul. So, stopping and or continuing if you don't stop. How to do that? All right. So, say if you get to the end of Waladallina, that's how it's written in the Quran. Dallina, fatha on the noon. When we stop there, we don't read the fatha. Waladallin, and maybe even lengthening the lean if you chose to do it. That type of mud. So that's where we will take a short break, inshallah, about 5 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. We'll come back and continue with the slides in my notes, which you check in what the sister says. I'm not sure if she sends me messages. I'm not going to see. And then sometimes there's questions on the chat, and I don't have time to check on that. I'm busy teaching, so like on Wednesday there are questions. What are you doing, man? You're getting taller, Last year you were only this.
That's because his hair was shorter.
His hair, okay, maybe that's right.
So the piece of
ان شاء الله تتكلم عن فرق قراءة حفص ما بين رواية طيبة الورش وطيبة النشر. طيبة النشر والشاطبية ما بين فصل منفصل لو ما كان نكتبهم.
ان شاء الله.
أنا عارف إنه يمكن 10-7 شهور.
احكام.
اللي قرأ أنا سبحان الله. When I developed asthma, it was hard for me to start reading the video. So worse, we took it from Imam, from Sheikh.
Yes.
But from Hafsa, you just like ijtihad.
From listening to the people.
If your stage with worse, like with Hafsa rules are very easy.
Easier, much shorter also than do.
Because actually when you start to watch, that's included Hafsa. Because worse has a lot of istithna'at. It's just exception from what the others are doing.
Yeah.
But the recitation with the Qasr Mudud, it's a lot easier for me.
Correct. Especially if you have asthma.
Because I did look for many books, but it's not really clear. They tell you like 7, between 7 and 10. And there's in the Waqf Sek, they're talking about the idgham in Kam Ma'ana. They're talking about the scene in the sword.
Yes.
But then I couldn't find them all of them in one place.
I actually wrote them down in one of my notebooks,
Inshallah,
Like this,
that's what I need.
that's in Virginia. I have to go bring that notebook.
Okay, you take your
Yeah,
time, but
I remember writing it down in one of my classes.
because I saw
Because it was
Ramadan,
template.
the other brothers, they tried to do with you like recite with Qasim al-Fasl.
Yeah, you need to practice a lot.
And especially when they get to the word haula, they forget that.
Yeah,
There's
the
no-
first one is, it's the second one. That's correct. You need practice. You need
You need
to
practice.
think a lot.
And when you recite with it a lot, it's gonna be hard for you to recite
Yes.
with the
Okay. I can do it for Juz Amma, but for the others now, it's like,
No
we do it.
problem? Okay.
No, I have a problem outside Juz Amma. Sometimes, even in Juz Amma, I forget sometimes, one or two.
Because whenever you find it, or
Inshallah.
just
Yeah.
even like follow with it, because
Yeah.
I know, like I read many books just to find them.
Right.
And by
Like-
yourself, it's
Like,
fine.
I was reading the other night. Qiyam. Kalla barra. Not
Oh, I
Qiyam.
was listening to you
Yeah.
because you
Because
get me
it's-
so confused because Warsh is different.
Right, yes.
Warsh is
There's no second.
no, there's no section.
Second,
in
yeah.
Warsh.
There is for the-
Okay, so
there is
for
for
the
the-
Qasim Munfasil,
Yeah.
is there section or not?
In what? Or in
No, in Habs.
Ups, no.
If you're gonna check
From
Qasim Munfasil, so
from
you're gonna
national
check
level?
all the sectors
Yeah.
away. Okay. No, because words, even the words,
Yes.
the nahu is like a little bit لأقسم بيوم القيامة وأقسم بالنفس اللوامة هيحسب
يحسب what?
الإنسان
Leans, yes. That,
فلن يجمع فإذا برق البصر.
instead of that.
And so there is
Yes.
many words that
I did watch myself, and I said, "What?"
It's
I did it with the study in the Dina. It's
because
hard,
you know
because I didn't practice it. I got the word most.
in that in Morocco there is one brother from Yemen
Mhm.
who's teaching in the university. What are we doing? Is it I'm reciting the 7 Qur'an, but when I get to worse, I said I'm going to get people.
Yes.
I said there is no way to say that to read it on the other side. So now
I
around the
hope I
world we
remember to
have
bring it.
hubs. We have Washington Morocco on the West Africa. There is Libya and Tunisia. And there is Bahrain, Sudan. There's nobody want to study here.
Yeah.
You're gonna his brother something. I'm sorry, it's
No,
fine.
that's okay.
Always, just-
I hope I remember to bring that note. I make one of those, so don't get it in books. Smell it.
And then you have to say that. Not wrong. And then on. Yeah. If you want to yeah, but you know, like, all day, not like that. You know, yes. And most people, they don't give you the play myself to be. And I started with me. First program. Then you went to the other. So they told me you have to go to the other. Because the house I said, no, it's good. I came here and said, no. They said, no, but it's not, it's the house. Not going to do it. But it's going to be, I don't know, chair, really, now, you have, how to, it's supposed to be. I said, I wanted to do, I like it. I wanted to do, they told me, we don't allow students. It was paid. I said, I'm going to try. I went back. I was the first, and I passed, but I wouldn't. I passed, I went back to the same. I said, you asked me about students. They were making. They were excited to become. I'm going to operate the center. My daughter is going to study. I got to go to what's it going to do? And this day, there's one short. You can go and ask for yourself. Why is that a good song? I don't know. It's only really good. So that is good. Like this. No. If you bring from the other world, you come back and film. So you're going to stay there for a while. So they know this. They know it's no problem. The problem I think is the judge. Very difficult. Yes. Even in school, in 5 minutes, you are speaking. Yeah. I say, try to make it more. No, I wouldn't know. You know? You know? Simple.
What should I add or focus on?
I won't be able, I probably won't be able to make it to the Sunday classes. Will they be from Ashes number two?
Maghrib to Isha.
On Sunday.
Okay.
Because I do on Thursdays. I get off work at 5:30.
Alaikum salam. Hi there.
What was the book that we're?
Tuhfatul Atfal. There's a book online just for the Arabic verses. You want this presentation? I can forward it to you.
Okay, yeah.
Just give me your email.
Okay. I'll shoot you a text.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get this?
Yeah, I was just going to say to the class. I forgot to say it at the beginning. I have a lot of things I forgot to say, but that's why I make notes. I don't always look at them. Sometimes I got like notes for a khutbah. Don't look at it or say, oh man, I forgot all of this. I should have said it. Because you don't want to look down, you know.
Okay, we are. Okay, great. I was gonna ask. We gotta transmutation of knowledge.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So just a couple of things. Maybe I should have said it at the beginning or added it to the first part of the workshop. You don't need to make notes. I can send you guys this exact PDF presentation. It's long. It's 157 pages, but most pages are just like this. You can just scroll through it. It has a little more in some places than you need. Like for example, we talked about the isti'adha, right? In this presentation, it tells you that you can connect, say, between Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Baqarah with Bismillah in between, right? But there's ways where you can read them unconnected. You can read them connected, but there's also one way that's not allowed. And the one that's not allowed is to say, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ آمِينَ. Actually, only saying Ameen. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. And then if you stop, that's not allowed. That's not allowed because Bismillah, you're giving the impression that Bismillah is part of the previous. So, just that's mentioned here. So we didn't go over that. One of the brothers told me one mistake that actually, I should include also in my notes. Very common mistake and a serious one because the meaning does change again to the opposite. And you hear this from some people, if I hear it as an imam following someone else, I would tell the person, you know what, you need to focus on this word. When they read Surah Al-Fatiha and say, Iyaka na'budu, or instead of them saying Iyaka with the shadda on the ya, if they take the shadda away, what's happening? The shadda helps to say you alone be worshipped, right? Where iya is actually just supporting the ka. Because we can't write just ka by itself in Arabic as a word by itself. So the iya is brought to hold it up, right? Like when someone says, in a khutbah, like usikum wa iyaya. You can't say, in other words, it means I advise you all and I advise myself. You can't say usikum wa ana because that's wrong grammar. He has to use a ya for mine or for me. I advise myself. I advise me. So you have to use a ya, right? But you can't just say e, or I can't just say ka. So I put iya. That's the Arabic, grammar part of it. But it means you alone because we put you in front, right? You be worshipped instead of saying we worship you, which is na'buduka. That will have less effect, right? It's not as powerful, right? If I say, I worship you, that means I worship you and I can worship someone else too. But if I say you alone I worship, it means only you I worship. That's why it's put forth. But if you take the shadda away and people say, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, you change the meaning. You said, it's besides you I worship. Someone other than you I'm worshiping. Isn't that like the flip of the meaning? So very important. That's why I say pay attention also, especially if you know how to read Arabic without the vowels and the tashkil, pay attention to them in the Quran, especially at the end of words, right? Because sometimes, what you might normally see as a dhamma, ya'lamu, might be because of the grammar in a sentence becomes ya'lam or ya'lama, right? Liya'lama. So, that's the purpose of grammar. The purpose of grammar is to make sure that the meaning is complete and fully understood. Because in Arabic, if we changed the vowels at the end of words, you could also, first of all, you're breaking the rules of grammar, but you also change your meaning, right? So, when we get to the rules of first the noon, and related to the noon also is the tanween, right? Because tanween, what we talked about earlier, the double fatha, double dhamma, double kasra, is basically the sound of a noon. See at the end of words, it's the only place you can see the double fatha, right? Say, for example, if you saw kitaban, and it might be kitabin or kitabun. The only place you can see the double vowel or the double fatha, double kasra is at the end of the words. And if you stop on those words, because the rules of stopping apply, for this one will become kitaba, this will become kitab, kitabun. But we're talking about it when you're connecting it in the middle of a sentence to the next word. All right, which means that one of the rules when you apply, there might be a tanween. There might be a ghunna with the tanween. There might be some other thing like idhar or ikhfa, right? One of the four rules that apply for noon sakin and tanween. So this slide, for example, is the verse of poetry in this book. Right? بالنون تسكن وللتنوين أربع أحكام فخذ تبديني. It rhymes, right? So that's a kind of poetry, and there's a translation that's originally the book itself. This is the explanation. So when it comes to the rules of noon sakin and tanween, and for some people, like this is the most important part of Tajweed. I don't think it's the most important. It is an important. And for me, the most important is pronouncing the letters correctly, the makharij, and the sifat, right? The articulation, point of articulation, get that correctly, how it comes out with the qualities and attributes that letter has, which might be like a whistling sound, or you might have to make it audible or soft, that strength and that kind of, which we're getting to. So 4 rules can apply. One, each letter of the alphabet, the consonants, can have only one of these apply to. Only one of them, right? What does izhar mean? Izhar. So if you see a 0 with a dot under, in transliteration, it's this letter. Izhar. Okay? If you see a qaf, a Q, that's a qaf, right? You see a dash over the A, it means it's an alif, the long alif, right? Like izhar, this alif. So the dash of the alif is that they're long vowels. You might see it for a oo sound, noon. That's a standard transliteration. So what does izhar mean? Because 6 letters of the Arabic alphabet, these 6 here, when they follow, they come after a tanween, in other words, the beginning of the next letter, or it's after a noon sakin. It could be also, say, in the beginning of the next letter or in the middle of a word. Let's say min, or like min. I don't remember exact examples. Min hamim. Right? you've got a a noon sakin. Sometimes you might have a tanween at the end of a word, but the next word is going to start with one of these 6 letters. So here we didn't write the alif, because you're not talking about the ah sound. You're talking about a, I, u, which is really a hamza, which a lot of times is written on or under an alif, not always. Actually, at the beginning of a word, it's always on an alif. Or it's taken away, but the alif is there. Because the alif is supposed to be silent. You can connect it to the word before. Or if it's, not the beginning of the sentence. Beginning of the alif. So one of these 6 letters that come after a noon sakin like this, you have to do izhar. So the rule is called izhar, but it's good to know what the word means. Manifestation is given you, right? What does that mean also? It means you have to make the noon clearly sounded. Min hamim, just like normal Arabic. Min hamim. No special rule actually has applied. You also don't make ghunna. So it's not supposed to be min hamim. Not supposed to hold a noon for like those 2. Some books will tell you 2, some will say 3, some might even say 4 for a ghunna. All right. I like to just say 3. Because say da, this is 2 count. Ki is 1 count, this vowel, 1 count, ki. 1. Or like 1 second. Ki da. Da is double that, so I count this is 2. And if there was a ghunna, count it as 3. Some might make it a little longer, but count it as 3 harakat. The length of 3 short vowels put together, like as 1 syllable. Or 3 seconds. Inna alladhi. Okay. So izhar would mean do not change the sound of the noon. Plus, in this case, for all izhar rules, we don't add ghunna. We don't make that special, beautiful sound from the nose. Right? It's min hamim, min hu. Nothing special has happened there. It's with the other rules. It's something you're not used to might happen. These are called Cataral letters. What does this mean also in English? It's from the throat. The ah and ha and ha and ha, they come from that part of your from your body, the throat, where it sounds like, just odd sounds. Actually, the hamza and the ha come from lower down and closer to the chest, and ha. All right, the lower throat, then you got the mid throat and the upper throat. Some people, make these 2 sound the same or similar. Be careful. Listen. And like for me, one of the first lessons when we do practical Arabic or practical Tajweed, I should say. Actually, like I'm a professor of Arabic. Some of my students, believe it or not, after studying Arabic for at least 1 semester, 2 semesters, they can read Arabic better than some people can read the Quran. Some Muslims can read it. And that's not, it shouldn't happen. Muslims should always be the best in reading the Quran. Non-Muslims shouldn't, supersede them or, overtake them in reciting the Quran. But one of the first things I would practice is to put an alif after each of these letters of the alphabet. Practice on the sounds. A, ba, da, tha. And do it together, so you get the confidence. You also first know how to do it by, in a group. Maybe you start off softly in a group, even, before I ask you to do it individually. And before I even ask you to read a whole ayah or, something that you've memorized, first practice. So this is what I mean by articulation of the sounds. And if you know how to say correctly, then you don't even have to learn the sifat, the attributes, whether it's hams or jahr or, shidda or khawa. Those things are just extra if you want more theory and if you need help when you're making mistakes. Or if you're not getting it right, then we get into the theory, more detail. But how these sounds are, you don't even have to know where they come out from your mouth or throat if they're correct. But Tajweed tells you in theory. Later we're going to come to points of articulation, and that's where you'll see mid throat, lower throat, upper throat, etc. And there's this is some of the points of articulation. We don't have to go into the details. Furthest letters means furthest from the mouth. So in the lower throat, etc., etc. So here's examples like Jannatin, Jannatin, Alfafa. And in like what Suleiman was talking about, you'll see the double kasra or the double fatha will be one above the other, which is a clue. Make ifhar in the mushafs that have been printed now, more commonly. Or you'll see the tanween here is at 69. 69, is that right? Yeah. Not like a 99. It could be within one word, but you won't see a tanween within one word. Within the same words, always nun, sakina, followed by one of those 6 letters. Between 2 words, either a nun or a tanween, and then the next letter or the next word starts with one of these 6 letters. It's here in gray, right? So when you, so you don't have to make notes. You'll get a copy of this, inshallah, right? And you can go through the examples yourself in your spare time. I also recommend you want a much shorter version. You want a simple book in Tajweed in English. There's one of the sisters many years ago, like 30, 40 years ago, Muhammad. You just Google a brief introduction to Tajweed, Muhammad. It's like a 20-page booklet. Beautiful, easy Tajweed, but all the rules, most of the rules are there. It doesn't get into too much details for some of the special rules, which is okay, that will like give you the last 1%. You know what I'm saying? You have to spend like 50% of your time with that last 1%. You're using up too much time for just the finer details. So Muhammad's booklet on the Tajweed should be online, maybe like $5. Maybe the shipping will be more expensive, unless you have Prime. Students only have Prime. There's a video. So, that was the first of those 4 rules, right? Idgham. Now we talk about idgham. Idgham. And sometimes you see a dash under the G and H because that's one letter in Arabic, the letter Ram, the letter Ra. Idgham has 6 letters. And it has 2 sections, right? So what does idgham mean? Here it says merging or assimilating. So let's say, for example, if I read a word like man, and the next word is yasha. If it's not Quran, then, even outside Quran, people usually apply this rule. But most people might not, or some people, then it's outside Quran, you can say man yasha. Within the Quran, you have to say may yasha. May. So what happened? This noon assimilated into the next letter. In other words, it lost its sound, or it became the sound of the next letter, which is really double. That's why you might see a shadda in the Muslim. And you know what? A lot of these rules of idgham, whether it's idgham of a noon or tanween, noon sakina tanween, or other types of idgham, the good news for you is most of the time the shadda in the Quran is there already to help you say it the way it should, to help. Again, it's good to know the rules, right? Because here it's not only idgham, it's also ghunna. Ghunna is a 3-second count, right? So it's supposed to be what? May yasha, and of course this one is a mic, right?
Also, would be no sukun.
And in some mushafs most mushafs, you won't see a noon, a sukun on the noon. And the tanween will also, you'll see now when you go to the examples, but we'll come to those examples. So the 2 sections, these 4 letters out of the 6, if they follow a noon sakina or tanween word, you're going to have to make a ghunna. But for lam and ra, you don't know. So why some letters have ghunna and some don't? What do you think, Ahmed? Some letters of the Arabic alphabet, whether it's idgham or ikhfa, you got to do ghunna. And some of them, we don't do ghunna. The rule is that. And what, in general, that's specific, right? But in general, why do you think the rules of Tajweed are there for us? Because we could have done without it, right? But why is it there? More than one reason. Give me one. Why do we have Tajweed?
So to make it easiest to.
Correct. It's more natural and flowing on your tongue. It sounds. It's easier to read. It's easier to say may yasha than to say man yasha on your tongue. it's easier to say may yasha, and it's even easier if you make the ghunna, may yasha. That's one reason. So it's easier. It's Allah is making our life easier. Something that's actually more natural to us. Tajweed is something that we may not realize because we say, oh, there's rules. But it's more natural and it should come easier with time and more enjoyable to read it that way. Also, it sounds better. So part of the wisdom behind Tajweed is ease, natural, way to read and sound. And of course, to make it, special so that people know it's Quran. When they hear someone reading, maybe okay, that's Quran. Unless some of those Christians are trying to cheat us. Be careful with those Christian radio stations in Arabic. I've heard them. I used to just listen to them for the meanings, like, what are they saying about Jesus? Oh man, again, making him God or the Son of God. So, for example, the print in the Mus'haf, you don't see a sukoon on the noon. That's your clue already that you're going to do assimilation or idgham. It might be ikhfa, but you gotta know the next letter is one of those 6 where you do assimilation. So may ya'mal. So it's written like this, it's pronounced like that. So the noon became silent, the ya became double. We don't write it ever like this because we gotta know it's man, it means whoever does good, does actions, and whoever acts in a certain way. We don't write it like this because we need to know the meaning of the words, right, from how they spell. But they recite it that way. That's why now dictation, remember we said spelling shouldn't be a problem in Arabic, but dictation might be a problem for those who are learning Arabic and it's not their mother tongue, it's not their first language, Dictation might be a problem especially if we're using the rules of Tajweed. If I say may yasha or may ya'mal, you might write it like this. And it's not supposed to be. Or if I say walhamdulillah, walhamdulillah, you can't just write a wow and a lam, walhamdulillah. You have to write that silent alif too, because it's part of the spelling, even though I didn't pronounce it. So gunna, no gunna, here's examples. So here's an example of how the tanween is not written one above the other. This is because of idgham, that's because of another rule, but it's not izhar. So the izhar, you'd see them one next to each other like this under the letter. Here they wanted in, to the left hand side. Same thing with this tanween here. It's actually 99. This is for izhar, but for the other rules, it's a 99. So even though it's the end of an ayah, it's put this way because in case you're ignoring the stop, you want to continue because you have a long breath, or just rush through it, or whatever your reason. It's sunnah actually to stop end of every ayah, but sometimes in Tarawih, and that time is a factor, your speed and stuff. Maybe your memorization. If you stop at every ayah, you might get a little confused. It's okay to continue to it, right? You can go on YouTube and one of the reciters from East Africa reads the whole of Surah Al-Fatiha in one breath and starts the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah the same breath. Or Abdul Basit, whole Fatiha in one breath. It's okay, it's allowed, it's not wrong. So the shadda, on the next letter of idgham is a great help. The batim min ba, there's two. The same rule applies twice here. Between all of those. Yeah. Okay, that's called idgham. Now the ones without ghunna, like mir rabbihim. You're not supposed to say mir rabbihim. That sounds unnatural, right? Mir rabbihim, your tongue is vibrating too much. Allah is making life easier for you. Like especially English-speaking Americans, like, how do you roll your tongue? How can you do it in Arabic? I can't do it. Practice from a young age. So don't hold it for more than the normal count. Transition quickly. So again, the sukoon is missing, right? In the Muslim. Some Muslims, depending where they print it, right? Maybe the ones in Pakistan might have the sukoon. But the shadda, after it overrules the sukoon. Right? Because the ones printed in Pakistan is usually the Farsi script, or a different script from what you see here. There's some exceptions to idgham, because technically idgham is between two different words, cannot be in the same word. Not like idgham, it has to be between two different words, even if it's a noon with a sukun. But there's 4 words where you have a noon sakin and one of the letters of idgham after. But because it's in the same word, we don't do idgham. Idgham has to be between two separate words, for this rule. So bunyan, you don't say bunyan, bunyan, pinwan, sunwan, and dunya. Dunya appears a lot, right? The others, some of them only once. Also, we don't, this is a little advanced. It says advanced topic, right? So between Yasin, if you don't stop on Yasin, and you want to read Yasin wal Quran. So at the end of, listen carefully, although you don't see it, Yasin, doesn't it end with the sound of a noon with no vowel? Yasin, well, you're not supposed to do it wrong. If you decide you want to read the 2 ayahs together. Or noon, well, you shouldn't be saying noon, well, noon, like dropping the end sound at the end of the first of noon. There's a noon, the beginning, and there's a noon at the end, right? Sound. You shouldn't be doing it wrong because it's an exception, or it doesn't fulfill the full definition of idgham for noon sakin. This is also a little advanced. Some of the 6 letters produce a complete idgham, and some are incomplete. We're not going to get into the details because it gets a little complicated. The third out of the 4 is what we call iqlab. So it's only 1 letter. The noon sakin or tanween followed by a ba. The ba becomes a meme. Only in sound, not in script. And it can be in the same word or 2 different words. Or the tanween, instead of a noon sakin, tanween followed by a ba, the next word starts with a ba. Right? You have to suppress, or first of all, you have to convert the noon into a meme. And you have to do ikhfa. So what's the meaning of ikhfa? What did they say above? Conversion, right? Change. The letter changes in its sound to something else. You have to, that's not what ikhfa means. Ikhfa means to suppress, change the sound of a noon to a lighter noon, or to something that's not a noon. So what does it mean? And of course, for ikhfa, you're going to do a gunna, right? So when you have an example like min ba, min ba, the ba is going to change to a meme sound. You also have to do a gunna. And when you're doing a gunna, you're suppressing the sound, or you're not putting your lips together totally like for a meme. So it's not supposed to be mim ba. It's not supposed to be mim ba. It's supposed to be mim ba. Like our teachers told us, if I put a needle between your lips, it's going to pass. Said, please don't do that. You might poke my lips. Said, I'm your teacher. I can do what I want. Because your dad said, you can send me back just the skin and bones. That's what my dad said to my teacher, Quran teacher. The flesh is yours. Just send me the bones if he needs the beating up. Those are the days where life was different. Today, if they said that, man, they go to prison. I can sue him in court, man. My father. Yeah, especially, yeah. I'm just kidding. My dad said that, but teacher wouldn't have done it. It's like, when you come to ikhfa, so the rule of ikhfa is being applied for iqlab, basically. And that's like complicated. But the rule of ikhfa, where you are supposed to hide the meme sound or the noon sound, it becomes a meme. In your hunna, and you might not see my lips, but you can hear. I'm not saying mim. All right, so that's a little advanced, but that's part of the rule. And then, the rest of the alphabet are the other 15 letters of the alphabet, where you're going to do ikhfa with gunna. All right, so let me just see this. I didn't give you too many examples of the bar, right? With tanween. So say here between rijalun rijalun and sadaqu. You got the tanween and then you got the sword. So you're supposed to do ikhfa, which is suppressing the noon sound, as well as ghunna. So if you try it in your mind, or slightly audibly for yourself, you should end up saying rijalun, rijalun sadaqu. So I'm not putting my tongue the exact spot for a noon that I'm supposed to inside my mouth. It's not rijalun, where the tip of the tongue touches the palate, right? It's not touching, it's like just hovering just before. That's just how I'm suppressing that sound. Rijalun sadaqu. Rijalun sadaqu. And so what I want you to do is, in your spare time, you should, in your spare time, try and listen to as much Quran as possible. Forget about those radio stations and music stations. They're not going to help you in your after. Listen to Quran. Get that, apps or CDs or whatever. When you listen to someone and they come across a rule of ikhfa being applied, ask yourself, can I hear how he's doing it? Or she, right? Instead of man. If they're saying man dhalladhi, they're not applying the rule to it correct. Or if you're reciting yourself. Inside one word like khalaqal insan. So here you see the missing alif, right? But the hanging short alif is there. Sometimes called a dagger alif. I like that name. Which means all the other alifs, the normal alifs, are sword alifs. You see some of our Yemeni brothers come with their dagger, inside the masjid. You see that, right? That's good. I like it. Might actually save our lives at some point, especially these days.
With the fact we don't have a limit on any of it.
You have ghunna, yes. Whether it's these 15 letters or the iqlab, the rule of ikhfa also applies with the ghunna.
So then,
Mim ba'd.
how do they differ exactly? What are the subtleties of difference between that and idgham? Because the idgham,
Idgham is total assimilation of the noon. You lost the whole noon totally. You doubled the letter after the noon sound. After the noon sakina or the tanween, you double that letter. May, this one. May yasha. The noon was totally lost. Ikhfa, the noon is somewhat still there. It's not a full noon, but it's like half a noon. All right. So
zero versus that.
Naran, not naran. That will be izhar. The opposite of ikhfa is izhar. Right? The first rule we did, number one, the one of manifestation. Adaban alima. Ban, clear manifestation. Right? The opposite of that is idgham. You lost the noon, and somewhere in between is ikhfa, which is also applied with the cloud.
So if we apply that in, for example, man yasha, instead we would read man yasha.
It's something like that. It sounds
I
odd to
think I
me.
just didn't really
Right. Hopefully it does now. Inshallah. Okay, here's a summary with the English words. And I like how the brother in New Jersey who explains this book, the Imam there. He says it's immigrant Mahmoud, not you. Immigrant Mahmoud comes to the country, right? And so now he's faced with a scenario around him that's a US society. So Mahmoud himself is the Noon Sakin of the Tanween. And he has all these other letters after him, one of the rest of the alphabet. Either he's going to get fully assimilated, he's going to lose his Muslim identity, and might even change his name to Michael or something else, right? Or he's going to still manifest himself as a Muslim. I'm Mahmoud, I'm wearing a thobe, my beard, not changing my name, I'm 5 times Salah, right? Or he's going to try and suppress some part of his identity. I'm Mahmoud, but call me Mo. I'm just going to go away for 5 minutes, right? I'm coming back soon. Where are you going? Don't worry about it. Goes and makes Salah and come back. Instead of saying, I'm going to make Salah. It's a word of suppression there. And then the worst thing is conversion. Right? It becomes a atheist. So that's how this chef put the case of the letters of noons or the rule of noon sakin and tanween. Any questions? This next one is very easy. Lesson 3 is short. It's just meme with the shadda and noon with the shadda. Yes or no? So heads. And don't give me the bobblehead anymore. Because I still don't know if it means yes or no or maybe. Or I'm no comment. That only happens in South Asia. So can you find a meme with the shadda? I hope nobody's offended. I'm just like a citizen of the whole world. So I feel like I'm just talking about myself too. Will you ever find a noon with a shadda, a meme with a shadda, or any letter with a shadda at the beginning of a word? What's this? No, not normally. You guys are right. You don't find it at the beginning of it. This is because of the rule of Tajweed, right? It was brought there. It's not part of the word. It's brought there because of idgham. But you won't see ever a shadda at the beginning of a word. Can you find it at the end of a word? Like on the last letter? Yeah. Inna, thumma. In time, but most times, is half, a little more than half. You'll find the middle of words. Right? And if it's any other letter of the alphabet besides these two, no ghunna. Right? Well, a ball lean, there's a shadda on the lam, you hear double lam, right? Ball. There's also some people make this mistake in al-Fatiha. They pull it, they make a ghunna for the lam, so they're making it more than its count. So they end up saying what? Ball. You held that lam too long. You try to make something of a ghunna. It's not coming from your nose, so it's not really a ghunna. You can only do it for these two letters. So the sound will come from the nose. Inna or thumma. If you say thumma and block your nose, the ghunna cannot come out. Thum, thum, blow up something. Artery, All right, so that's the rule here. And the count of a ghunna, as I said, some people say 2, some say 3. Somewhere as far as 4, I just say 3. All right. So I make something like Rahman, the alif of ma, 2. I make something like the meat, or it gets connected. Ra is 1 count, ma has 2 counts, and then the hunna has 3 counts, and then some of the mads will have 4, 5, 6. So inna, it's equivalent to about 3 seconds, or a little less, but if you make it 3, because as a beginner, I tell you, lengthen this syllable 3 seconds, you're probably going to do 2. You think it's 3, but it's 2. Let me try that. So think of a 3-second count. Inna alladhi. Right. That's this whole lesson 3. I think that's all it is there. He gets into some detail about the meme, it can be called a idgham, idhara with a sakin. Or actually, this is now beyond the shadda, right? So the rules of not noon with a sukoon or a tanween, because that's the same sound. Now the rules that apply for a meme that has a sukoon. The next letter after, either in the same word or in the next word, right? Like alayhim, walad ball. And this one, especially when the letter fa or wow comes after a meme, some people make a ghunna. You're not supposed to. Only if the next letter is a ba or another meme, that's when you make a ghunna. After a meme with the sukoon, again, whether it's in the same word, we'll show you the examples, or the next word, you're only looking for one of these 2 letters. Actually, if the next letter is a meme, you'll see a shadda on the meme, comes after, right? Show you, and the shadda on the meme is automatically we will come to the examples. So here only 3 rules apply. Iqlab doesn't apply because we never change the meme into something. The meme must have a sakin or a sukoon, must have a sukoon. Any of the other letters of the alphabet besides these 2, you do idgham. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا عليهم. Clearly manifest the meme sound, no ghunna, move on, no special rule of tajweed. Just like how you say anything in Arabic. If it is followed by a ba, That now reminds us of the iqlab rule of the noon starting here, that noon changed to a meme. Now you follow by a ba, you do ikhfa, called ikhfa shafawi. Idgham shafawi, ikhfa shafawi, idgham shafawi. Shafawi means from the lips because the meme is produced in the lip. Shafawi. So you gotta hide the meme, followed by a ba, right? Wama hum bimu'minin. So hum followed by bimu'minin. It starts with the ba with the kasb bimu'minin. So what you're supposed to do, ikhfa of the meme, not wama hum, but wama hum and a ghun. 3 seconds with that. Wama hum bimu'minin. So I'm not pressing my lips together, leaving a small space in between. Needs practice. It's not just going to come automatically. It's like you're going to have doubts whether you're doing it correctly, and maybe have a teacher in front who will help. So, any letter besides the two, the ba and the meme, the ba here and the meme. Questions?
I think you're mistaken. Is there a lesser opinion that you can, in this case, close the?
Yes, there is opinion. I should have said that. You can do a shift. You can do ikhfa by closing your lips, but that is the minority of people. So I'm trying to teach like the majority, trying to teach the more common. But in some of these cases, there might be more than one opinion, not only for this, for some of the other things too, right? Idgham shafawi is also called idgham between saghir. It's two terms for the same thing. If a meme with a sakin is followed by another meme. I think here we see some examples, right? Inna rabbahum in Surah Al-Adiyat. Inna rabbahum bihim. There's a meme with a sukoon, which I think also in the Mus'haf you won't see the sukoon on the meme. Because you're doing ikhfa, right? And then the ba would be ikhfa plus ghunna. Inna rabbahu, inna, that's the shadda. Rabbahum bihim. There is idgham. There's a meme with a sukoon followed by ya, so nothing special. Inna rabbahum bihim yawma idhin laqabil, there's idgham. Why is there a small meme here on top of this meme? If you read Bismillah for the next surah together with it. So if you're connecting between ayat, you also might have to apply a rule that's not so obvious now, right? Might be hidden, might not even be a clue like this is a clue, right? The whole tanween is not even written. If you're pausing, of course, you don't even read any part of the tanween. If you're not pausing, you read a dhamma followed by a meme sound that is actually iqlab, because the next surah starts with Bismillah. Al-Qari'ah, we have to read Bismillah for the beginning of every surah besides which one? At-Tawbah. Any other examples? Say, for example, of course, we are talking only about meme sakin. There's not going to be a tanween rule for this. Any questions? Take a break just now. We're just going to cover this part. If a meme is followed by another meme, you're going to see a shadda anyway on the meme. Right, the second one. That's already your clue. It falls under this rule. Or it's similar to this rule, right? Not falls under, it's similar. Ghunna, come in, and it's idgham, so you can squeeze your lips together. All right. Between at'amahum, and I like that, I like the books of Tajweed that have examples mostly from Juz Amma, because most of us memorize Juz Amma, especially the last surahs, and like this one from Surah Quraysh. Oh, quite a few. So yes, exactly. Surah Quraysh has actually from the beginning has a lot of rules of Tajweed in those few short verses. Right? So, oh yeah, correct. There's a lot. There's your iqlab, there's your it's all of the 4 rules are in there, right? Maybe not the idgham, except idgham shuffle. the meme section. And any of the rest of the alphabet we said, right? Like alayhim waladhdallin. Nothing special. Don't make any gunna. Don't change the meme. And that's basically the lesson 3 complete. And that's a good time to take a short break. And we'll come back and talk a little bit about the lam, a little bit about the ra, and 1 or 2 other things towards the end. You can focus too much.
So, Imam, which reciter is better to follow this one? Which reciter will you
Yeah, I
advise?
said at the beginning, so it's Hafs and Asim,
Mhm.
and both shall to be in the unit.
Okay.
Except when I get to one part
Okay.
of the med muttasil, actually munfasil. It's we call it jaiz, so it's allowed for you to drop that med,
Okay.
to like the normal 2 counts instead of 4. But that's from Tariq Tayyib, but you got to know other rules apply with it. So I try to teach this shall to be but Hafs and Asim. So like guys who read Warsh, some of the rules are, most of it is the same. Some of it's going to change. Which country are you from again? And what they read Hafs? It's become more popular, but traditionally I think they were Warsh.
Right, yes.
They were
Well,
Warsh.
it is mostly wrong.
Still today,
Yes.
but you learn.
My country is just close to
No,
Suleiman.
it's
Suleiman's country. It's basically the same country, but
Correct,
it's separated.
the French through lines. So we just the French and the British.
Yes.
They open the map.
Uh-huh.
While they say, let's just draw a line. I don't care. Pikes and circles and pikes. Some of the other rules
You
we
did
can
that to
rush
me
through it
before, I
quickly.
remember. Yeah.
We're not going to spend too much time.
Very like it's very good.
So someone like Al-Imam Shafi, he had a photographic memory. And there are many people, that if they read a book, they would have to cover one page so that they don't take both pictures in at the same time. And so when he was a student, Al-Imam Shafi in Mecca, one night he couldn't memorize his work. Like he read stuff, but nothing was sticking. And his teacher's name was Waqi. We know that from the verse of poetry that he composed, verses of poetry. So he went to the next day to his teacher and he complained that he can't memorize. Something happened that, yesterday that created a problem now, So the teacher asked him, what did you really do? He said, yeah, this is what I did. And maybe this is the problem. There was this Muslim woman walking past and I kind of looked at her ankles, maybe in an inappropriate way or something. The teacher said, that's the problem. All right, that's the problem. So then he composed verses of poetry. I complained to Waqi, my teacher, about my bad memorization. So he guided me to abandon any type of sin. So as I said, it's important, and of course the verses continue, because knowledge is a light that he gives from himself, and it's not given to those who commit sins through knowledge, and the knowledge that benefits you. So, comes easier, inshallah, to learn about Islam and even the rules of Tajweed, and you start focusing a little more, right, and grow closer to Allah and love His book, and love to read it, and like to listen to it. So as I said, we're going to go through some of the other rules, but not, as labored. Maybe you, skip through some of slides as well. So the letter lam, and here is giving you this some detail about talking about the letter lam. I'm more focused on the lam in the word Allah. It's not even kind of yet. But also, when you read words that start with al, the equivalent of the definite article al, which most times is translated as the, not always, but like in alhamdu, right? We don't ever write a small hamza above, even though it's if it's the beginning of a sentence, because if it's not at the beginning of a sentence, this hamza written as a alif should be silent. But depending on what the letter after the lam is, you may have to assimilate the lam into the next letter, or you may have to make it manifest and pronounce the lam. So, for example, alhamdu, right? You hear the lam of al clearly. There's no assimilation. It's also called, if you've learned it somewhere, part of the huruf shamsiya or the sun letters. Sorry, this one is moon letter, right? Huruf qamariya. Alhamdu, like al-qamar, right? Which is also in the Quran, al-qamar. The other sun letters is, say, for example, you say ar-Rahman. So what happened now to the L sound of al? Ar-Rahman came assimilated in the next letter, like if you said the word for sun, the sun, ash-shams. Right, ash-shamsu wal-qamaru wal-husban. So, it's added it as part of a tajweed lesson, though in the Quran, life becomes easy because you'll see for alhamdu, you'll see a sukoon on the lam. And for ar-Rahman, you won't see the sukoon on the lam, but you see a shadda on the letter after. And not counting the alif. So we have 28 letters, not counting the alif. How many letters are sun letters and moon letters? If you want to know, exactly which are which and learn them as, theory. If you're getting them right, you know how to say the word the house, al-bayt, right? If you're using the word bayt. And it's not a bayt. If it comes naturally to you, al-bayt, there's no need to know which letters are sun, which is moon. This rule is like redundant. But if you're using the word dar for house or home, and you put al in front, will it be al-dar or ad-dar? Ad-dar, right? So that's like, if it comes naturally, forget this word. Don't even worry about the details. If you're having a problem, then you might have to know that 14 out of the 28 are sun letters and other 14 are moon. Right? And they count the lam as a sun letter. Right? Allah or Allahum or whatever the word might be. Lam of the verb, just ignore some of these things. So most times the al means the, but sometimes, like when you say Alhamdulillah, what's the translation? Maybe all praises, right? Sometimes not even translated, praise be to Allah. So al is not always translated, but it's used as a definite article. Not to be confused with some words that may start with al or il, al or il, al even, but they're not, this is not the al of the, it's maybe part of the root letters, right? Like alhama, alhamahu. It's not al of that you will actually see a small hamza on the but like for example, these alifs here, these hamzas, I should say, they call hamzatul wasl. That's why that small symbol of like a head of a sword from the word wasl means a silent hamza, as opposed to a hamzatul qata, like in the word ana, right? Or the kasra maybe either or dhamma. That one is never silent. This one is never silent in the Quran. Come across it and there is a hamza, you have to read e or o, sometimes might have a sukoon. But if there's a symbol above in the mushaf like this, not a circle, but like a sword, the head of a sword, that's supposed to be silent. It's in the middle of a sentence. Alhamdulillah, I can't make it silent unless I'm reading it together with the end of Bismillah, because the beginning of Al-Fatih. Here I shouldn't say Rabbi al-Alameen. Rabbi al-Alameen. Say it together. Even if you're Palestinian, you say Ittaqi Allah. Ittaqi Allah if it's in the Quran. All right. I still like that. Ittaqi Allah. Like leave the word Allah full and heavy lam. It's like, it's not totally correct, but I like it. Or like someone said, how come we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim? Like we glorifying shaitan by saying shaitan and we come to Bismillah. Shouldn't be the other way around. The rules of Tajweed. You can't make your own rules. Sometimes, like here, the lam is silent, but there's going to be idgham, some type of idgham, all right? That's done for you in the mushaf. Like nothing on the lam, no sukoon, but the ra is a shadda. So you don't have to know that rule of Tajweed to read it correctly and always just follow the tashkil, follow the vowing system. All right. Here, the lam, there's two lams, one in the end of qul and one at the beginning of law, and you see a shadda on the second lam, which doesn't really matter. Qul law kana. It's a slight difference. If there was no shadda, I'm supposed to say qul law, like a small pause. But once the shadda is there, there's no pause. Qul law, instead of qul law. So it's a simulation. That's why they counted the lam as a sun letter. Right? So in the mushaf, the shadda is going to help you a lot when there's idgham of two letters that are the same or similar or close to each other. Sometimes, for example, there's nothing special here. It's idgham. So, there's no rule of Tajweed, special rule. It's just read it like normal. Right? So we don't even have to talk about it. Calling it idghar here, it's a complete sound of a noon or lam in this case. At other times there is idgham or something else. Now the lam in the word Allah, so that's what we mean by laf. It's laf al-jalala, the word that refers to Allah. In other words, the word Allah. The lam of Allah sometimes have to be heavy, sometimes have to be light. In other words, when we say Bismillah, We just said the word Allah in Bismillah. The lam is light. That's what we mean by him. Your lips are going downwards, or you smile. It's going in this direction. Bismillah, a'udhu billah. Right? Down. When I'm reading it heavy, my mouth is going in this direction. So, inna Allah. Right? So when are you going to make it heavy and when are you going to make it light? It's basically very simple. You have to look at the letter, the vowel of the last letter before Allah, for the word Allah, and just be careful with lillah. It's already part of this. Lam became part of the word Allah, the alif or the hamza of Allah, the drop. So that's a kasra. Or like Bismillah, right? Earlier, Bismillah, the meme has a kasra, and then you got the word Allah. This hamza is silent. So from that kasra to the word Allah, transition with a kasra, which is a natural E sound. And to make it easy to transition, keep the word Allah light. Bismillah, Alhamdulillah. Right? But if the letter before Allah has a Dhamma or a Fatha, like Hizballah, 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 Hizbullah, the word Allah must be heavy. If you're saying the word Allah by itself, like at the beginning of Ayatul Kursi, then you're counting this fatha, right, on the hamza that cannot be silent because the beginning of a sentence, the beginning of the ayah. Allahu la ilaha, right? Lillahi ma fis sama. So that's basically the rule of the lam in Allah, and that's the main part of all of the rules of the lam. The others are more about idgham, right? Like bar rafa Allah, bar rafa. The lam becomes assimilated, making it ram. No gunna. Gunnas can only occur with noon and mim. Noon sakin, mim sakin, tanween. That's the only time you do a gunna, if I'm not correct, in the shut down the noon and the mim. Other than that, there's no gunna. So bar rafa, not bal rafa. The shadda on the ra is already great help. And now, just like English. When you're reading English, when I'm reading the word nay, my eyes are on the next few words. That's what makes you fluent, right? You can speed read. When I'm reading the word nay, my eyes are already here. If you can speed read. Like most people will be this word or that word, right? The same should happen with Arabic, because if I'm looking at bal and reading bal, but then I see, the next one is a shadda, I'm in trouble. As I said, bal. So when you're reading bal, you're supposed to be looking at the next word to see whether there's some kind of connection, assimilation, rule of which means. So bar, rafa, will. Get to the ha, dhamma, word Allah will be heavy, right? وَكَانَ اللَّهُ. So that's what we mean by the rules of the lam mostly. Then, as I said, the most important part of Tajweed for many people, especially for non-Arabs, or where Arabic is, maybe died in the family, Arabic speakers, second generation, third generation Arab Americans. The sound of these letters. Even for native speakers, some of these we were just talking, right? In some of the Arabic countries, the Bad and Labar might be the exact same sound. I said earlier, no two letters of Arabic alphabet sound the same. Right? Has to be different. So the makharij, where the letters emanate in the mouth, throat, lips, nose, etc. Right? There's 5 points of articulation, and these 5 also divided into subsections. It's good to know, for those letters you're struggling with, where exactly should you be putting your tongue, or where the sound should come from. If you don't have a problem pronouncing the letters correctly, don't even bother. But nice, if you're struggling with the ayn and the ha, it's good to know it comes from the mid-throat area, so you can focus on where the pressure should be. What's happening when the A is coming from the chest, where it's supposed to interact in your throat to produce these sounds of the vocal cords, right? Then it's good to know. Question?
Just the rules of Allah is the same as Allah.
Yes. Oh, yes. So another very good point. Should also write it down. When we talk about the kalam in Allah, it applies for the word Allahumma. So that's written with humma connected at the end, which is not normal for any word to connect to Allah, except Allahumma, which is a way of saying Ya Allah. It's using the dua, right? Allahumma gfir lana. It's like saying Ya Allah gfir lana. It's basically the same thing. It's a Quranic word, it's in the Sunnah. But the rules of Lam of Allah apply. So, if you have, before Allahumma, if you have something like qul, Allah will get a kasra to connect between the two words, qulillahumma. It's not qulillahumma. I don't think in any of the qira'ah.
Does the humra still apply to other names, or is it only restricted to
As humma, only for Allah. You don't see it anywhere in any, you see hum,
Mhm.
right? Alayhim is a type of hum, but you see like, Rabbuhum. That hum is different from humma. That hum means their Lord, Rabbuhum. But humma in Allahumma is like, yeah. That's only for, you won't see humma normally in any other one. I don't think there's any other type of word that has humma. Maybe a verb that, built that way with those letters. So, one way to test where the letter comes from is put a sukoon on it, put a sound in front of it. Of. Or just take that same letter and put an alif after. Or, I like the alif after. Or, sa, ka, ra. Or this way, ar, ak, f. One thing that might help some of you, especially if you speak other languages similar to Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, or some words in, say, even in Hindi, that's actually originally Arabic, like intivar, which is in Urdu also, right? Or volume, right? 3 letters of the Arabic alphabet. No matter how lazy you are, no matter how tired you are, you have to put your tongue between your teeth to get it going. Whether you're Arab, non-Arab, reading Quran, especially. The first one is the, it's got a dot there, right? The, like in Valley, the. Just like the English word the. If you can speak English and say the, and you're not saying the man went down 0. If you're saying the in English, there should be no problem. When you open Al-Baqarah and you say ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, don't say ذَلِكَ. So, if you can say the word 3, same TH sound. So, ثَوَابًا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ. So, just put your tongue between your teeth. Don't be shy. No one's going to comment on your tongue, how it looks. And this one, wow, your mouth is also round. It's actually the elevated version of the. So the, I'm smiling. The, I'm frowning. The, your mouth's going this way. But your tongue must be between your teeth. This can help. It's part of some of the sifat of the qualities, but it can help you if you remember that part and you're struggling with these letter sounds. It's not so important. Within the throat, as I said, there's upper, lower, middle. Some of the letters are produced. So the five areas of the mouth include, firstly, the part that's closest to the chest. It's called the jaw, right? The internal oral cavity from below the throat. Because the sounds start off in your lungs. There's air. And then there's some interaction with your vocal cords or your tongue, right? Or your palate or anything else, your nose. That's how you produce sounds. You analyze it, individually. You probably don't think about that. So the jaw, or this internal oral cavity, is the sounds of your vowels, or the sounds of the e, u, right? Like the u sound of nu, or the e sound of he, and the a sound of a. So it's the long fatha, in other words, alif, waw, and ya. Then you got the throat, which is subdivided into 3 sections, 2 letters each. Then you got the tongue area, all these letters that you see here, either from the back of the mouth, or the back of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, the edges of the tongue, the tip of the tongue, together with teeth or the palate, or the other parts. Then you got the lips, where you produce the ba, the fa, ba, mim, and waw. So either with your tongue, with your teeth, the bottom lip, get the fa sound, fa. And it's close to the inside the mouth. If you start going outside the mouth, you get letter sounds like P and V, which Arabic doesn't have, right? And they say, linguists tell us there's some reason why you don't find, there's speculation, why you don't find a P and a V in Arabic. Because in those old days, maybe even till today, right? When you produce these sounds, you're using the outside of your mouth. If you live in a hot desert conditions, you don't want to use the outside. You want to keep your mouth closed as much as possible. You don't want to get thirsty, or they're scarce. And so they talk about those, geographical reasons, right? And other social, linguistic reasons why these sounds are not there. Because for you're going further outside the mouth. For b. So Arabic doesn't have that, but it has a f in the meme, in the wow, in the ba. Those are the ones from the lips. And then, of course, you got the sound from your nasal cavity, from your nose, producing the ghunna sound. It's not a letter of the alphabet, but when you read the noon and the meme in some combinations. And that's lesson 4, basically. There's 7 lessons in total, but now it's, not the most important parts. For me, it is, but, for this book, it's like, or for introduction, you don't have to know this very well, right? Some of these attributes. So the letter has a sound, but it also has some other qualities associated with. So say, for example, when I make an S sound, there's also some kind of whistling sound. So there's some kind of whistling. So that's what the scholars of Tajweed have helped you, to identify each letter and each quality it has. Some of it, again, it may not be relevant for you because you're making the sound correctly, so you don't have to worry about it. When you have a doubt, or when you're not sure, and you're reading certain letters, for example, this quality of jahr and hams. Should the letter have like loudness in it, right? Say, for example, if I read the letter ba, up. The ending sound is strength. There's not strength, but there's audibility, right? Whereas say a letter like the scene as it's like strength at the end, or the loudness is dying away. It becomes like a whisper. Okay, and if you're saying the letters correctly, and all the letters that have a whisper are these letters. These letters and the rest of them fall under jahr. Again, you don't have to know these. Some of these qualities have opposites, like loudness and whisper. Most of them have either 2 extreme ends and something in between, like lin or umar. It's not as strong or forceful. Say if you read the letter lam, al. It's somewhere in between, being very strong, like aj, the strength there, right? When you make the jim sound. Put a fatha and a sukun on the letter, fatha before, and you get, or put a alif after. In this case, you have to put a sukun, aj, strong at the end. Whereas, say, for example, if I took the letter that's not an S, it's not so strong at the end. I'm not using as much energy, basically, to produce that S sound, because it falls under soft. These are in between, right? And it's not as strong, as forceful as these, and not as soft as the C. So 5 letters in the middle, and then about how much are these? 6, 7. So most of them fall under that. So it's easy and light and soft. Same with hums and jahr, audibility and whisper. Most are whispers. So Arabic language is soft, it's easy. But there are some difficult letters, or hard to pronounce, or hard sounds. Then you may have, this is very important, letters that are elevated like these 7. Your mouth needs to be round, full. Again, the direction of your jaws is this way. Put an alif after these. Kho. Khalidin, not kha. Right? If you're reading the Quran, the rules of Tajweed, I'm not talking about Arabic. And then you might say his name is Khalid. But if I see the same word in the Quran, Khalid, and Khalid, I have no choice. Right? So these 6 and these 7. Qala. It's easier to say qala than to try to make your mouth go in this direction. Qala, qala. It's like you're putting more stress on your jaws. Maybe it needs exercise, but not in this case. Right? So most of them are actually where your mouth will be flat. The, ja. So most of the time when you're reading Arabic, or you're speaking Arabic, and you're reading Quran especially, or you're speaking, in general, your mouth is in this direction. It's like things have to be depressed or light, not elevated. Only when you come to these 7 letters and lam in Allah in the Quran, especially for the ra, lam in Allah in the ra, in the Quran, you have to make them elevated. Otherwise, keep them light. People speak Arabic and their mouth is mostly like this. They probably got the wrong accent. They're pronouncing things incorrectly. Like I notice Iranians speak, those who can speak Arabic, because of Persian, they're doing this also in Arabic. And Arabic, it's like this, like French. Like you're smiling all the time, mostly French. I don't know French much. And I see French people speaking French, like their mouths. And that's mostly for Arabic, not always, but mostly. 4 letters, that your mouth is also rounded and full inside. Like these are the most elevated forms. We call it a saw, saw, it's like really heavy. Instead of your mouth being open, like ba. Then you got some letters where, the ending just flows. La, ar, af. Like there's a release of air and sound. All right, so these are the 6 letters here. You're not supposed to hold it back like you do with the rest of the alphabet. Right? If I read any other letter, us, there is some flow, but at some point it stops quickly. But this one can still go a little more. Al. All right, that's what they mean here by flowing or sharpness. And this is the same slide. Then you got, unpaired attributes, like some of them have a whistling sound, the S or the Z sounds. Some of them have qalqala. So this is a very important rule of Tajweed. It's put here, it's almost like hidden, and it's very important. So if these 5 letters, 5, right? If they have a sukoon on them, or you end you're putting a stop and you're putting a sukoon for the stop, or the shadda, right, like the end of some of the ayahs is Surah Al-Ladab, or Hajj. Then you have to apply the rule of qalqala. Unfortunately, in this book, we didn't get into details because there's qalqala sughra, kubra, akbar. It's not in this book, but that can be dealt with when you get to. It's actually an important rule to have early on in teaching. When you start to read the Quran, it should be introduced by the teacher early on, and not like embedded somewhere where it's easy to ignore. Right? Some of the other ones are not so important. The lean, this one of leniency or lean, it's when when you have a wow, like khawf, and the letter before has a fatha. There's something really special, or like yawm. Or you have a ya with a sukoon, and before it also a fatha. Right? Aidi, bait. So that's just the sound of O and A together with the consonant before. Like low, like bay. So that's like in between being a consonant and a vowel sound. This letter here. In between being a consonant and a vowel. Question.
Does the mean have a med of its own?
It can have. It depends what you want to apply. Then we come into those.
Oh.
But the lean, there isn't. Yes. When you get like words like khawf and you stop in it. Or li'ila fi Quraysh. It could be a mud. It depends what you choose. You can read in other words, li'ila fi Quraysh, no mud. Or you can, it's like 2 counts, right? Because there's 2 letters. Or you can make it with 4 counts. Li'ila fi Quraysh. Or you can make it 6 counts. Li'ila fi Quraysh. If I'm not mistaken. I usually do 4, but maybe I'll need to check that. Maybe we are coming to that. Again, tafheem and tarqiq is like, this is the summary. 7 letters there, and then sometimes the lam, we come into the roster. The mad of the alif, if it's after these letters, also the alif becomes heavy. Just you may not realize it, or you may not have thought of it. Like qala, when I say qala, the qaf is heavy, but the alif also, because of the qaf, gets affected. Because I don't go from qa to qala. I don't go from qa to a. I keep the or because of the qaf. So the alif also can become heavy. The rest of the alphabet's light. Right. Lam only in Allah, and the ra in certain situations which we come into. And then scales, how heavy compared to the rest of the alphabet, not so important. That's also not so important. The rules of the ra can be very complicated, can get very detailed. The most important thing to remember, it's like the lam of Allah, you're looking at the vowel there of the word before Allah, but When it's the Ra, if it has a Fatha or a Dhamma, long or short, meaning like there's an alif after or and or a waw after, these are going to be heavy, right? Raziqin, anta khairu ra, not ra, right? If it has the ra has a kasra or a kasra and a ya, then it's light, right? Real ones here. When you're reading the ra, your tongue should be, your lips should be flat. Inside the mouth, the tongue should be also flat. Right? Don't try to make some kind of ilbaq where you're closing the tongue or concaving it for any reason. The problem becomes when the ra has a sukoon. And what precedes it, what follows it sometimes, right? That's when different rules apply. And it can get really intense, right? Like it says here, in 5 cases, it could be heavy, and in 5 cases, light. That's if the ra, depending on whether it has a fatha, dhamma, kasra, and also before, if it's got a sukoon and what's before and after. But for example, these words are straightforward, right? It's got a fatha, rahman, rahman, not rahman. Ruh, my mouth's full, right? Heavy. Rijal, rihun, right? That's if it has a vowel. When it has a vowel, it's easy. When it doesn't have a vowel, in other words, you'll see a circle or a semicircle in the Quran. Al-Quran. So is the ra heavy or light? Heavy because of the dhamma before on the qaf. Right? Same with yar. وَلَئِلَّمْ يَرْحَمْنَا. Yar. When you get more advanced, then you know the ya is light, the ra is heavy, the hamid, ta is light. So it's okay, my mouth. Ya, ro, ha, yo, ham, yo, ham. It's not supposed to be yo, ham, because then I made every letter. And that's how advanced Tajweed. I'm not a master in it, to be honest also. All right, I try to pay attention sometimes, and I should be doing all the time. So if you listen carefully to some readers, you'll hear the distinction clearly, right? They make it even more pronounced, where each letter is given a full, account of heavy or light. But say when you come to the end of ayahs, the ra becomes a sukoon if it doesn't have double fatha. It's not qadiran, it becomes qadir. Then it's heavy because of the fatha. But if the ayah ends in qadir is the ra light or heavy. Because of the kasra, this is a long kasra. Of the ya, it's light. Here, because of the ya, it's light. Khair, not khayr, khair. In other words, your lips, even though I'm not hearing a R sound with a vowel, the lips go downwards. Khair. That's what kasra means, right? Breaking the bottom jaw. E sound. It's more like when the ra is in the middle of a word or in the middle of an ayah and has a sukoon, depends on what comes before it, and sometimes what comes after it. Say, for example, like irji' ilayhim. This one I think is variable, but still, because you're starting an ayah, it's supposed to be a kasra. There's a bad kasra. Is a ra light or heavy? This one is tricky because the alif or the hamza is not part of the root letters, so it's like you got to know some Arab. It's not part of the root letters, it can become heavy. I think it's variable, so it can also be light. I do it heavy. Or like in Surah Al-Fajr, irji'i ila rabbiki. But if I'm not mistaken, it could also be, according to some books of Tajweed, can also be light. Irtabu. You can say ir or ir.
Does it have anything to do with the fact that if you connect multiple,
if you connect, then this rule doesn't apply. Then you look at also the letter before it, mutma'innatu, that's a dhamma. So there it's going to be heavy. There you got no choice, but it's not. When you're making it light, it's got nothing to do with that dhamma. Or if you're making it heavy, it's got to do with whether it's part of the original word or not. Here we look at the letter after. The letter after is one of those 7 that are heavy. In normal, you make this one heavy. Or you have a choice, actually. I think you have a choice. I usually make it heavy. You'll pause. You'll saw there. There's only 5 words in the Quran where you have to pay attention to this. But if it's any other letter of the alphabet, like around this, the ain or the ya, it's going to make it light automatically, or it doesn't affect the kasra before. So fir'aun, this is a common word. Some people might say fir'aun, fir, not fir, fir'aun, right? The ra in one of the previous slides also has this quality of repetition. So your tongue has to vibrate at least 2 times, if not more. You're going to say, I don't know how to roll my tongue. You know, you can. You just have to try. Practice. Firqin is also part of those rules, and there's exceptions, and this is one of the exceptions, I think. Comes advanced, so, you know, not everyone will even understand it.
What is awla focus? Is it to make it mufakama or
Mufaqama.
mufakama?
Yeah. That's the more rajih qawl, as far as I remember. I could be wrong. But yeah, there's some exceptions in that. We're going to skip over that. A couple of things before we end. This is going to be Maghrib time in about 20 minutes. The last lesson, lesson 7, talks about other types of idgham, which we're not going to go into because the shadda of the letter after that you have to, where you're going to do idgham, is already, you know, what you just do. Just follow the shadda, right? In the mushaf, it's always written for you when there's idgham. It doesn't expect you to know how and when to do it, so that's why they wrote it for us. But we want to talk about the other one, which is the mudud, right? How to lengthen. But just in case you come across, you know, some of these rules, you can get 2 exact same letters between 2 different words, like the ba is repeated at the end of this one. And so, you know, you might see the shadda on the ba. I think you will in the mushaf. Idhab bi kitab. Why is the ba important? Because not idhab bi kitab. You're not supposed to pause between, like you might do, you know, for other letters of the alphabet or for other things where you don't do it wrong. Idhab bi kitab. Sometimes you don't do it wrong because of the vowel, right? Both are vowels, so you don't do the vowel. There's no idgham. I think that's in there. But again, we want to get to the mudud because that's the important part of it. So there's different types of idgham. Some are called kabir, saghir, mithlain, mutajanis, mutaba'id, etc., mutaqarib. It's just follow the shadda. Like here, for example, bal and rafa, bar rafa. Just follow the shadda, right? But when you read bal, make sure you're looking at the next word. So you don't just say bal, you say bar. All right. Where some masahib don't put a shadda on the ya, you might have a problem. So hopefully they all have them where you need to do shadda, like mim, or nakhlukum. See the qaf here, similar to where the kaf is pronounced in the mouth. So the qaf became silent or became assimilated into the kaf. Can you guys see the mouth? All right, so you make the qaf silent and you make a double kaf. Nakh. Is this from 29 juz? Al-Mursalat, nakhlukum. You don't read a qaf. Nakhlukum. So double K. Don't pause like I just did. Nakhlukum. Right? Just follow the shadda. Any type of idgham, just follow the shadda. Like when you come across when Nuh alayhi salam speaks to his son, Ya bunayya irkam ma'ana. You don't know any rules of idgham, it doesn't matter because the shadda on the meme just solves all your problems. Or yalhad dhalik. If you don't stop with this jim, waqf jaiz, yalhad dhalik. Yalhad dhalik. See, remember a while back, one brother told me, he said, you know, sometimes I hear you read Ayatul Kursi, and you come to hifdhuhuma. Hifdhuhuma, the fa sounds like a V. He said, go review the qualities of the fa. Well, it's true, he was right. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. There's no V in Arabic. And if I'm saying hifdhu, that's wrong. So he just told me, go and look at the qualities of the fa, and you'll see why it should be hif, an F sound, not a V sound. Easy to make that mistake. This is the last lesson, and you know, very important part of Arabic. I mean, of Tajweed, I should say. And there's different types of mads or mudud, English elongation. Also, only special for the Quran, right? Or if you're saying it outside, you've been influenced by Quran reading. So for example, when you said yasha, right? Again, follow the symbols. When you see these symbols like this, and maybe some mushafs have that or something similar, follow the symbols, but you still have to know how long, what count to make. 4, 5, 6, right? Some of them you have to make them the equivalent of 6 counts, or like 6 seconds. Lean, for example. You might say it less and think it's enough. It usually won't be enough. As a beginner, it's probably not enough. When we teach our kids how to read within Tajweed, we hold our hands. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح. Get to a ghunna, right? وَرَأَيْتَن. As soon as I press, kids better read long. That's how my kids did at Tajweed, right? They first learned how to read correctly, then they learn the rules later, which will help them make sure it's always correct, right? So just because they think if I don't press it, they say either it's not long enough. So as long as I'm pressing the hand, that's how long you're gonna make the math. I'm counting in my head. I know naturally it's gonna be 5 or 6 counts, whatever I want it to be. So beginners will have a problem making it the required length. And so here's the rules of mud. They could be the basic or natural mud, which is just alif, waw, ya, normal sound. Qala, qila, yaqul, it's 2 counts. That's the easy one. There's nothing special there. There's no extra length. These ones could have an extra length. It's a derived mud, and then it depends whether it's because of the sukoon and or the hamza before, after, I should say, right? So this is like a summary of the next few pages, which is about 10 more pages. So say, for example, why is a mud important? Because if this one's got no mud because of the silent alif, right? A circle like this, not a semicircle, a circle with a silent alif. Ana, with I, ana. This one's got a natural mud at the end. And natural mud means no more than 2 counts, no? Regular alif sound. This one's got no alif and no mud, not more than 1 count. And you change the meaning if you don't follow those rules. Or akhadna, we took. Akhadna, the na here means we. But akhadna, the nun without the alif is for they, the women, the females. So if you lengthen that alif, you change the meaning totally from they took to we took. Like they took from you a solemn oath called marriage. Mithaq and Ghalira. So, just some idea. So different types of mud, like mud lean you were talking about, right? Here he says 2 harakas, effectively longer. If it's added this sukun, which is still coming to it. Okay? This is just like putting the word and you're reading the last vowel. So nothing special. Yawma, no mud, more than 2 counts. Bayna. It's if you stop on these words. It's called arid this sukun. Something like that. Then you have a choice. This one, substituting the tanween for an alif. Shukura, when you stop, it's no more shukuran. Shukura. Also, basic 2 counts. Don't lengthen it more than that. But that's called, you substituted the tanween with an alif. Even if you don't see an alif, if you stop on ma'an, a lot of people get this wrong because there's no alif written in the Muslim. When you stop on ma or laysu sawa, you stop there. Some people say laysu sawa because they don't see the alif. But in the Mus'haf, you have to say sawa and because of the double fatha. The only time you don't read the alif on the double fatha, and you won't see it also, is a ta marbut, alif maksura, and sometimes hamzas, but you won't read it on the feminine word with the ta marbut. Like if rahmatan, stopped on it, what do you say? Rahma. You change the ta marbuta into the round ta into a ha, right? You don't change it. Double fatha into an alif. like this was here, we guys spoke about. Then you got the mad sila surah. Again, maybe if you just follow the script and you don't see the symbol of a mad, then you make a natural mad sound. Walam yakul lahu. It's not lahu, one count, it's two counts. Lahu. So you see a small vowel there, it's not so clear here. Follow the script. Anhu, this is short, you don't see a wow. Anhu, one count. Baluhu. So why are some the same letter, same word, same meaning of this green letter? But why do some of them have one count and some two? It all depends on the vowel before. It's a sukoon like this, one count. It's a dhamma, two counts. I mean, it's any short vowel, like a dhamma or fatha. But again, you don't need to know that if you just follow the script. Right? That's why some of these we don't have to go through in detail. There are some exceptions. For example, yarbahu, it's not yarbahu, but it's supposed to be because this has a fatha before. But you don't see the wow, so you don't read yarbahu. This is exception. Right? So there's 5 places in the mushaf. This one's supposed to have been short. Fihi muhana, but you see a small ya in the shape. So, but this one you're going to learn, even though it should have been short. Yeah. Should have been is not a thing with the Quran. It's what Allah decided. Right? There were no rules before. There were no rules of grammar even before the Quran was revealed, and for a long time after. So you can't say the Quran has grammar mistakes. What are you talking about? There were no rules at that time. Some folks try to attack the Quran. Like, same with Arji. There's 2 times Arji. It's supposed to be Arjihu, but there's reasons why it's changed like that. But to do something with the meaning or some type of association with the word before. Yes, yes, of course. Again, it's Hafs. It's Hafs and Asim. Yes, if someone's reading a different qira'ah and riwayah, Warsh or Qalun or, Aduri or something, don't expect the same rules, don't expect the same tashkil. When you hear an imam reading and he's from, say, Morocco or Senegal, and he says, Maliki Yawmiddin, don't correct him in Surah Al-Fatiha. Don't scream from the back, Maliki Yawmiddin. If I'm at the back there, I'll come and smack you. It's on tape, oh my God. I apologize. I wasn't looking at anyone in particular. Yeah, you don't have to. That is a different recitation. Go to Morocco and start correcting every second word. He's reading Warsh and you correct him according to Hafs. People will throw you out of the masjid. Yeah.
Because Hafs is the only one who
Correct.
like that.
Yeah. He. Otherwise, it's fi. Yes. So even the script of the Mus'haf, if you get a copy of the Mus'haf in Warsh, it's available, like in Saudi Arabia for sale, or some places they give out. I have one. You go and look at that word fi, you won't see that small ya after fi. You won't see it because in that recitation it's not part of the actual letters of the Quran. It is put there for vowel. The vowels were not there when the Quran was first written down. The dots were not even there. That's why you might come across a word like this in the very first print. No dots. And so one qira'ah is fatabayyanu and another one fatatabtu. Because they can all apply. You just have to change the number of dots or where they position. And both are qira'at, of the 7 qira'at. So those were added later, thank goodness, because otherwise you'd have a problem reading, right? Reading Quran without vowels, without dots. Questions?
Yeah, my question was sometimes people can jump in watch.
In one rak'ah, in one sitting, when you should be reading the same qira'ah, the same riwayah, the same tariq, if you're following Shatibiya or Tayyiba. Sometimes people make it confused, but they shouldn't. Even if you listen to a professional reciter like Abdul Basit, if they want to read more than one, qira'ah or riwayah, they first complete that part of the ayah or the whole ayah and then start again and then do it in a different riwayah or qira'ah. There's certain rules that have to be applied. When one of them,
That's not his song.
No, that's not his son.
there was one imam, one Qari from Egypt, I forget his name now, we had a problem because he was mixing in the same bread. And they stopped him, but he's still finding ways to get his tapes passed on. Saeed, something, I can't remember his name, and I even had tapes of him, those old audio tapes. Some of the young people don't know what I'm talking about, cassette tapes. See what I mean? This is important, right? So if a mid letter like alif, waw, ya is followed by a hamza, if it's in a different word, la a'budu, you have a choice of 2, 4, or 5 length. 2 is if you're following right? Like la a'budu, without a mid, la a'budu. You need to know some of the other rules that apply. Most commonly it's 4. La a'budu ma ta'ma, la a'budu ma ta'budu, wa la antum. So it's that rule. Some people might make it 5, but 4 is the best. If it's in the same word of Arabic, like an-nisa, right? In an-nisa, 4 or 5, 4 is best, so you don't have to think about whether it's in the same word or different word. This is again up, right? And ask. Medal is just 2 points, so I don't know. There's no symbol of a med. This one you'll see as little line over the alif, little line over the alif here. Follow the symbol. Follow the road signs, otherwise it'll be an accident. Because of a sukoon, sometimes you have to produce a mad, and lots of times it's 6 harakat, compulsory, like in al-haqqa, the shadda has a sukoon. The shadda after a long sound, the sukoon of the lam after a long sound, alif lam, because of these letters at the beginning of certain surahs, right? We have to make them the lam, here the lam is a shadda after, and this ra doesn't have, but the lam itself in both cases is lam, 6 counts. Shouldn't be less, it's wajib. This is wajib 4. This is jaiz, but you have to know the rules of, if you want to shorten the other rules. There's some that can be 2, 4, or 6. This is the one we talked about, lean, or doesn't have to be lean, but when you come to a stop on a long vowel, Rabbil Alameen, you choose 2, 4, or 6, but you have to be consistent. I chose for the first ayah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, 4. Next ayah has to end in 4. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmuddin. I choose 6. I'm going to make the people wait long behind me. All right. Maybe I'll choose 2. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. The next ayah should not be Maliki Yawmiddin. You've broken the rule of Tajweed. Some guys don't know they do it, but they do.
And just to be clear, that's if you're ending at that.
That's the end of ayah.
If you
Yes.
continue
When you change the last vowel into a sukoon and the letter before is a vowel letter, alif, waw, ya, which happens in most of the ayahs of Surah Al-Fatiha, right? If not all of them. I think all of them. And then you also got, of course, at the beginning of surahs, these letters of the alphabet. So you have to know every alphabet's name, or at least the 14 that are used for beginning of surahs, right? I think there's 28 or 29 surahs that start with 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 letters. You have to say the letter's name in full, Qaf, not just Qaf. And because Qaf has an alif followed by a sukoon, technically, right? It's a mad. Alif followed by a sukoon is a Qaf. Whereas Ra is not an alif followed by anything else. Alif, Lam, Ra. It's just a Ra and Alif, but there's no Hamza after. Some people might spell it for Ra, Alif, Hamza, when they're writing out the name in full, but that's not.
Like it was very strong that we follow.
So Kaf has a mud. Ha does not. Ha is for B is only 2 counts. Ya is only 2 counts. Ain, there's difference of opinion because it's lean and it's lean spoon, so you're stopping. So the Ain can be 4 or can be 6. Depending again which qira'ah or which rule of tajweed, and then the sword at the end is 6 because you stop. So Kaf, okay, let me read what tajweed. Ka, 6 marks. Ka, ha, ya, ain can be 4 or 6. Ain. So, and really between ain and sad, there's ikhfa. For those who have advanced tajweed, between ain and sad, there's ikhfa because ain ends in a noon with a sukoon, and sad starts with the letter sad, which is part of the letters of ikhfa. So it's supposed to be ain, sad, with a hunna as well. But you got to be advanced, right? And that's the end of this lesson, alhamdulillah, end of this book. Everything has, some hardship and has some, some shirra is like, seriousness, jid, walikulli shirratin fatra, and everything that has like, seriousness will expend energy and make you tired. And then if your exhaustion leads to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, like learning tajweed, all these rules, if it gets to reading the Quran with tajweed like the Prophet ﷺ, then you've succeeded. And if it leads somewhere else, then you will wasted your time. You are the school. It's just a saying. That's a hadith actually. It's not a well-known hadith. It's in Ibn Hibban. So any questions? We can end there, inshallah. It's most of what I wanted to cover. It's some other things are not so important. Some of my own notes, I'll just cover them. My notes and others. I just didn't like the qalqala here in this book, right? Should be a little bit more detailed. You can get the Tajweed books online. You can buy that one of Muhammad. Qalqala will be explained in more detail. And that's it. So jazakumullah khairan. There's no questions. And someone can do the adhan for us. And let's just end with a short dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this effort of ours, it's part of our good deeds, weigh heavily on the day of judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the light of the Quran in our hearts, in our tongues, in our limbs, and in our actions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with us, to guide us, to guide our families, to help us, to help them too. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His forgiveness. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala nabiyyina wa sallim wa sallim ala nabiyyina wa mu'minat wal muslimina wal muslimat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat. Innaka sami'un qareebun mujib da'awat. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Give me any feedback you guys have on the text or privately, personally, directly. Don't start a fight.
I'm going to give you our email so you can send.
Oh yes, so you just write it down somewhere, inshallah. Let's get just in my book will be better, so I have it in one place. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. If you want the presentation here, you're welcome. Just put your name down here, and inshallah I'll send it. There's an email to you. Fareed.
If you can get and please practice so
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it after Salah. We just look out for the announcement for the adult classes for Quran, inshallah. The one that I'm planning to have on a Sunday evening can be for both sisters and brothers. And if the sisters want to have a sister teacher, let me get, inshallah, more information for you. Look out for the announcements.
So there is actually a question for you. Is India also a vowel?
okay.
It's an E sound, yes. But if it's a Y sound, it's just type